here we are at the end of Warzone 1. Season 5 mid-season updates, probably the last major patch we're going to get for Warzone 1. Everything's going to be focused on Warzone 2 from here on out. I'm not positive if they'll have more patches or not, but this is probably the last major one we're going to get. So I just want to take a second and thank all of the dev studios that worked on this game. This was a life-changing game for me and so many others. So many people absolutely loved this game, and I personally know that I spent more time playing Warzone than potentially any other game in my life, if you count all the testing work and things like that. And I've played a lot of games a lot, so that's saying something, but huge thank you to those dev teams. I also want to thank all the people that have made this a life-changing game for me. So all of you, the viewers, you guys supporting me through YouTube, Twitch, using the website, subscribing to the website. It's been absolutely amazing. We're going to do everything we can do to have the best possible coverage for Warzone 2. Really, really big things coming for TGD in the future. So yeah, just a big thank you to everyone involved, both the studios, the communities, my community. I appreciate you all so much. So for today's video, I'm just going to go through the Season 5 mid-season update. Weapon changes, basically. There's a huge number of weapon changes. Some of them are pretty important. But yeah, it's going to be probably a pretty long video because I'm going to go through all the changes, and then I'm going to get TGD updated directly after that. But let's jump into it, and we'll talk about all the Warzone weapon changes. Before jumping into the actual video, I want to talk about our sponsor, HelloFresh. A bunch of you have probably heard about HelloFresh before. Basically, it's a meal kit delivery service. So once a week, you'll get a box delivered to you with your pre-selected meals that you wanted to order in that box. It basically comes with all the ingredients, and then you cook the meal yourself. It's usually about $7.50 per meal, so a reasonable price. And they're really, really good meals. Like, HelloFresh is an excellently rated service. I know personally for myself, I actually enjoy cooking. I just don't like to go shopping. I don't like to do all the work that goes into starting the cooking process. So for me, HelloFresh is basically perfect. They have a ton of different meals. Basically every month you'll pick the meals that you want, how many meals that you want sent. They have amount of time it takes to cook each meal on here. They have a bunch of different diets too. So if you're doing keto, if you're doing Mediterranean, a bunch of different options on here that you can pick from. But if you want to try this out, it really helps me out if you use my code. So you'll get 65% off your first box of food. So that'll be a week's worth of food. You get 65% off if you use my special link. That'll be down in the video description and the comment section as well. It's a pretty cool sponsorship. I actually am a big fan of the product, so I hope you guys check it out. Okay, first up, we've got two new weapons. We have the BP-50, which is an assault rifle. This is the F2000, if you remember that, all the way back from the original Modern Warfare 2 in 2009. I'm pretty excited to use this. I think that it was one of my favorite guns back then, so hopefully it'll be pretty good in Warzone. And then we have the Lienna 57. This is a new LMG. Directly onto the weapon adjustments. So right off the bat, we get some interesting buffs and nerfs. The AMAX got a nice buff, 4 meters more damage range and more upper torso damage, so chest damage. I'm sure I'll cover this in the future about how that actually affects the combination time to kill and, like, you know, chest shot, headshot combinations. Automaton got a nerf. So Automaton didn't have like amazing time to kill before, but it's just really, really accurate. It has very little visual recoil, very little actual recoil. It actually does have a lot of like magnitude of recoil, but it's perfectly straight in a line and there's no bounce left and right. So like most of your shots land with it if you learn how to control the recoil. So that's what makes the Automaton so good. It actually has like 2 or 3 times as much recoil as the Modern Warfare M4 in terms of magnitude. But like I said, it's just easier to control because it's perfectly predictable. It's just a straight line. So it did need a little bit of a nerf. It was just too easy to hit your shots. So neck multiplier was decreased. Lower torso damage multiplier was decreased as well. So just a little bit of lower DPS output. M4A1 from Modern Warfare got a little bit of a buff. The neck damage multiplier increased by 0.09. So I'm guessing this will affect the shots to kill with certain combinations of shot percentages. QBZ from Black Ops Cold War. This is a gun that I've never liked, but a lot of other people did. It has a increase to headshot multiplier and increase to neck shot multiplier, so a little bit of a buff there. Again, that probably affects the shots to kill a little bit. The Modern Warfare ODEN surprisingly got a little bit of a buff. The muzzle velocity was increased by 3.5%, and then the upper arm damage multiplier was increased to 1.2, up from 1. So basically, I think that's probably going to be the same as chest now on upper arm. The Odin was one of those guns that I spent forever trying to make work back in like original Verdansk because it had such good time to kill compared to everything else. But it just ended up being that it was just too inconsistent. The recoil was just a touch too inconsistent to really hit all your shots compared to something like a Grau or a Bruin that just had low recoil and still decent time to kill. So maybe with this change, a little extra damage, we'll see it be a little more viable. Next up, we have the EX1. I've wanted to do a whole video covering the EX1, but I just haven't gotten around to it. It's a really interesting weapon. Maybe this will be the chance now since it's got some changes here. So the minimum damage was buffed up to 11, up from 10. ADS spread was decreased to 0.01, down from 0.2. So it used to have ADS spread. I didn't know that. If you don't know what ADS spread, it's basically like hipfire spread. So there's a hipfire cone. ADS spread's the same thing just by your ADS. So there's a cone of where the bullets can go rather than just being exactly on the reticle's dot. So that's a nice change. I didn't even know that was a thing. That could have been part of the reason why the gun felt kind of awkward. The beam condenser, I don't even know what this is, to be honest. I think this is the DMR attachment. So min damage increased to 30, up from 28. The burst barrel damage increased to 24, up from 20. This could be disgusting now. That might be insane. I'll have to check that out. That might be one of my next videos, actually. It's just a full EX1 breakdown, since it has like 4 different ways you can build it to literally be every type of gun in the game. Really interesting gun overall. Low temp laser recoil control is now increased by 1%, and hipfire accuracy increased by 1%. Charge amp PV movement speed penalty decreased by 1%, and ADS movement speed penalty now decreased by -5%. So a little bit slower movement with that attachment. Itra burst, auto burst fire now enabled. That's really big. That makes burst guns much easier to use. Rate of fire time decreased to 0.068, up from 0.065. So 68 milliseconds. That sounds like an increase. Rate of fire time decreased to 0.068, up from 0.065. That's an increase of 3 milliseconds, right? I'm assuming that's the burst delay, basically 68 milliseconds between each burst. We'll see how that plays out. I will have to check this out and see what that means, because I'm confused by the verbiage there. Perfetto 140mm Rapida fire rate bonus decreased to 14%, down from 20%. Vertical recoil now increased by 18%. Horizontal recoil control penalty increased to -50%, down from -40%. So nerfs to the rapid barrel. The 36 round mag burst fire cooldown bonus decreased to 6%, down from 10%. So again, this is a nerf. This must have reduced that burst delay in between each burst. Now it's only 6%. Hard scope initial recoil control decreased when using hard scope on the Itra burst. So with hard scope, you'll no longer get decreased. No, now it actually decreases your initial firing recoil. So you can't. That's probably to do with this auto burst fire being enabled. EM2. So EM2 Black Ops Cold War was a meta for a long time. It was a really fun meta too, because it was a high recoil, high damage meta. It took a lot of skill to control that recoil, but once you mastered it, you could really fry people. But they nerfed it pretty bad. It has really bad recoil right now. But now it has a really high headshot multiplier, so 1.5 instead of 1.3. Main damage increased to 36, up from 35. So this is gonna be fun to play with. This could be interesting because it's gonna be like the ultimate skill gun. I think it's gonna have really high damage output, but it's gonna be really hard to control. So that'll be interesting. The FFAR, if you guys were around during Black Ops Cold War, integration into Verdansk, FFAR was the meta for a long time. It had just absolutely insane ADS firing strafe speeds. So while you're ADS strafing and firing, you moved super fast. And they've buffed that back up a little bit again. So the ADS movement speed scale is up to 1.4, used to be 1.25. The ADS time was decreased to 300 milliseconds, down from 310. And then the ultralight, which is the strafe speed barrel, now increases your ADS movement speed while firing by 3.5%. So this is going to be really zoomy again in terms of strafe speed. It'll be interesting. I got a little muzzle velocity buff as well. Volkswagen ADS movement speed scaler decreased to 1.42, down from 1.55. So the Volks going to be a lot slower ADS movement speed now, but it'll still be pretty fast. It's still a pretty good gun, good sniper support. But this will bring it more in line with the other weapons. It was kind of the standout in terms of ARs for strafe speed. Shotguns I don't ever really talk about. Basically the 410 Iron got a buff. It looks like a pretty significant buff to me. Buck and slug rounds headshot damage has been increased, so overall it looks like a pretty big buff to the 410 Ironhide. The Vanguard combat shotgun got a similar buff to the Ironhide, just buffs across the board for shotguns. It looks like the Gallo, this was a oppressive meta, so hopefully that doesn't come back. But lots of damage increases, ADS time is better, movement speed's better, add 7% more damage range with the reinforced barrels, so they're really buffing up shotguns a little bit. Very few people are using shotguns right now. That's partially because content creators don't talk about them very much, and just because they weren't that good compared to a lot of the SMGs. So I think this is an okay change. I personally am not a fan of shotguns, but I know some players are. Street Sweeper was a meta as well. The mid 2 pellet damage increased. Mid 2 pellet damage increased to 14, up from 12. I don't know what that means, to be honest, but we got damage increases for the Street Sweeper, so that's going to be probably a decent shotgun again. Onto the subs, we've got the Armaguerra. The Armaguerra has been kind of the jack of all trades recently. It was the best strafe speed build. It was the best all-around build. It was just a fantastic SMG, so it's good to see this get nerfed a little bit. Headshot damage down from 1.58 to 1.5. Next shot damage multiplier down to 1.30, down from 1.3. So typo there. This was probably over 1.3. That's the only thing that would really make sense there. So I believe this is probably just a typo. We'll check all this out, of course. Unfortunately, there's no private matches right now, so it's hard for me to get in and test damage, but if there's specific things I need to target, I can queue into the same live match as friends and check stuff out. ADS movement speed scaler decreased to 1.29, down from 1.32, so not a big change to ADS movement speed, but we'll see down here the skeletal stock. The skeletal stock was pretty much the go-to stock for most builds, helped with initial recoil and gave you really crazy strafe speeds. So now it only helps 28% with your strafe speed instead of 35%. 9mm mag, or 9mm 60 round mag capacity was decreased down to 55. It's an interesting change. I didn't think the damage from mag was too high, but I think they're just trying to balance this in kind of an interesting way. So five bullets less. I think that'll make it a little harder to down multiple people with one mag, just because the damage was pretty low already. So 60 round mag felt a little bit restrictive in terms of full team fights. I was always a really big fan of the 8mm 72 round mag. As you guys have watched my channel, I've recommended both mags for different situations. So if you wanted a lower recoil build, more like sniper support, I would generally recommend the 60 round. But for everything else, I pretty much use the 72 round just because the extra bullets for situations where you don't want to reload, really helpful. I liked the extra damage range, the extra bullet velocity. It did slow you down movement-wise a little more than the 60 round, but it had a lot of positives that I really liked the 72 round mag for. So I'll probably be sticking with that now that the capacity of the 60 round has been decreased by a bunch. Again, this is a typo here, so this should be down from 72. Bullfrog from Black Ops Cold War. The Bullfrog was always like a really easy to use SMG that was not super strong, but it was always really easy to use. Lower arm damage multiplier increased to 1.0, up from 0.9. Hand damage multiplier increased to 1.0, up from 0.9. Again, I'm aware of these other damage multipliers. I know what they all are from various sources, but I just haven't. The vast majority of guns, like 99.5% of the guns, there might be a few guns in the game that have like a hand multiplier. Just not worth taking the time to cover that because it's just almost never going to make a difference. But interestingly, now lower arm damage is up on the Bullfrog across the board. Gonna be a really easy to use gun. RA225, next damage multiplier decreased to 1.1, down from 1.7. So it's no longer going to have that headshot damage to the neck. So it's going to be just a general like chest shot to your neck, which is interesting. I don't know if it really needed this. I guess if they're going to increase the mag capacity, maybe that's a way to balance it out a little bit. But the RA225 was not like a broken SMG. It was good. It was a very competitive SMG. And after these Arma nerfs, it would probably come into the meta a lot more. But with this neck damage change, it's not going to be quite so good anymore. The rapid barrel rate of fire was decreased to only 10% extra instead of 15%. Vertical recoil penalty increased to -10%, so you get worse vertical recoil, and even worse, 5% extra worse horizontal recoil as well. 4 extra bullets on 2 of the mags, so I'm not sure. The RA is probably still going to be close to meta, but not quite meta after these changes. The Blixen's gotten a lot of nerfs over the last few patches. Now we've got a lower torso damage multiplier decreased to 1.01 down from 1.1. So even lower, even more nerf to the Blixen. It's kind of fallen out of the meta. It's still a good, easy to use gun, but it's not like the best of the best anymore like it used to be. It's done a lot of interesting things in this patch that I think are actually really, really good. So the ISO from Modern Warfare has really never seen its day, never been a meta gun. The neck damage multiplier is increased up to 1.15, up from 1.01. So that's going to be probably a couple extra damage in all damage ranges. Sprint to fighter time was decreased, so decreased by 5%. So it's going to be easier to use as an SMG. CX9 was always pretty good, but had that small mag that really held it back. It always has good numbers, but it's really slow because it's a Modern Warfare gun with the 50-round mag. But now we have increased headshot damage, increased neck shot damage, and better sprint to fire time. So that's a nice little buff to the CX9. I really think they're kind of, this patch as a whole seems like a massive, massive win to me. I really like these balancing changes so far. The one thing I'm a little worried about is that EX1 burst. I actually used the EX1 as a burst gun for a while before this change, and it was kind of okay. It wasn't great, but it was kind of okay. So I'm a little nervous that this is going to be a lot. 4 damage is a huge difference for a weapon overall. But anyway, back to the patch notes. KSP-45 from Black Ops Cold War now has auto burst fire. That's going to be huge for an SMG. It's really hard to use a burst gun as an SMG because you have to time your aim with your with the burst. And when you have to hit that trigger or click to make that burst happen, it can be hard to time that correctly. This is going to make it way, way better. Lower extremities damage multiplier decreased to 0.9 down from 1. So a little bit of a nerf to damage. Probably still won't be anywhere near the meta, even though it has auto burst now. MP40 from Vanguard. This was the meta for a long time, but it kind of has fallen out of it now. It just doesn't have the time to kill to compete with most of the meta weapons. The 7.62 Gorenko 45-round mag now has a higher muzzle velocity and more damage range by a little tiny bit. Probably not going to make much of a difference there. And then on to the PPSH. So PPSH has been definitely the meta here in the last few months. It's been the hip fire combination with, it has quite a bit of recoil. So for something that's more consistent, you probably would have gone with like the Armaguerra. But the PPSH was pretty oppressive up close because it had that crazy high fire rate, which is super forgiving for missed shots, combined with ridiculous hip fire and pretty good movement. And just basically everything that makes an SMG good, the PPSH had for the most part. It just had pretty high actual recoil. So now we've got a min damage decreased to 18 down from 19. So minimum damage, that's the last damage range. This is a good change because the PPSH tended to have pretty good time to kill even out at range. So hopefully this reduces that by like 1 shot at least. Upper leg damage multiplier was decreased to 0.9 down from 1. Things like this are good for hipfire guns. That's a good nerf for a hipfire gun because you can't really pick where your bullet's going with a hipfire gun. Some shots are definitely hitting your upper legs. So that's a good change since a lot of people use this as hipfire. Kovalevskaya, this thing was the hipfire barrel that pretty much ran on every single loadout people had. It was great for hipfire, great for fire rate. Has a slight hipfire nerf from 50% down to 45% here. 8mm Nambu 71 round mag. So this is the mag that I like to use on PPSH. It was basically the small caliber magazine. And now you only get 64 bullets. The damage range penalty was decreased to minus 20%. Used to be minus 25%, so you get a little bit more damage range now. Fire rate bonus was decreased slightly, so it's not going to shoot quite as fast. Vertical recoil control decreased to 10%, down from 15%, so it used to help 15%. Now it only helps 10%. So 5% change there, 5% change on horizontal recoil as well. So you're going to have more recoil, a little bit worse fire rate, smaller mag with the Nambu. It's going to make it much more difficult to use as a hipfire SMG and for ADSing because it's going to have more recoil. Hipfire accuracy decreased 3% down from 4%. That's not really a big change at all. The Empress 140mm Rapid. So the Rapid barrel used to help 10% on fire rate, now only helps 8.5%. And then vertical recoil control is now decreased by 10%. So they're trying to make this really a hipfire gun, it sounds like. They've hurt the recoil even more. They've hurt it at range. So I think they're really trying to push this into only being a hipfire option, which I think is interesting. I mean, it's good to have different weapons for different types of play. And then tight grip, the benefit the tight grip provides has been decreased. Okay, on to the LMGs. So the UGM-8 obviously was the meta for the last month or so. It's been really good for a long time. It's been literally top tier since it came out, but because of other nerfs, it kind of came into its own as like the shining meta. for this last month or so. So they decreased the minimum damage to 22, so it's going to do a little bit less damage at range. That's important because the way it worked out before, it had one of those combination shots where basically just mixing in one headshot or two headshots was going to dramatically reduce that time to kill. So just changing the damage across the body at long ranges, that's going to pretty much increase the shots to kill, I'm sure, by at least one. And it could be even more than one in some cases when those headshots are mixed in. Headshot damage multiplier decreased to 1.5 down from 1.6. Same thing I just said about minimum damage. That's going to be that's actually really big. It doesn't sound like a big change, but those two changes combined are going to make this feel like it doesn't delete you quite as fast at range. Neck damage multiplier decreased dramatically as well. Same thing I just said. The neck damage, because the way the base damage is lined up across the body, neck damage reduced that time to kill a lot of the time if you just hit one neck shot. So yeah, this is a pretty big nerf. It doesn't seem like a huge nerf, but it's a pretty big nerf. And they also increased the recoil. The long barrel, this was the barrel that everybody used pretty much. Muzzle velocity decreased to 30% down from 35%, so slightly less muzzle velocity. This is the burst barrel, so the Rome walled. Muzzle velocity was increased up to 15%, up from 10%. It was still pretty good. It got nerfed and people stopped using it after that video I said where it was insane and everybody started using it. It got nerfed like just a few days later. I found out they had already nerfed that like months before from one of the devs that just hadn't made it to the live environment yet. So now it's still it's still good. It's still really good. It just doesn't hit very hard. But with this little muzzle velocity buff, I bet it'll be at least somewhat close on par with the other meta build that's currently been going around. The 125 round box, the capacity was decreased to 100 down from 125, and recoil control was decreased to 12.5% down from 15%. This is a pretty big change with that slow reload time, having only 100 shots with how fast this gun fires. You're going to just melt through that ammo and really not be able to have too much time in a fight. So I think these are pretty big nerfs. I might even prefer the burst version of the gun again after these changes. We got a Modern Warfare Crossbow buff to upper extremities and lower torso. Not much else to say about that. M1 Garand, again, I haven't had time to go in and actually check these things out, but I bet the Garand was pretty nasty if you built it correctly. Min damage was decreased to 47, down from 48, and then initial recoil was decreased with hardscope. So instead of only helping after, half a second of ADS time like hardscope did before, now it's going to hurt that initial recoil as well. Onto the sniper rifle changes. AX50 from Modern Warfare. This was always like a favorite gun of the community, even though it wasn't statistically as good as the HDR. People really loved it. One, for the recoil, so when you took a shot with this, you could still see like it kind of just came back towards you instead of kicking up. And it also had great audio, and just it was a very satisfying gun to use. Bullet drop off decreased. I don't know if they're saying the like the amount of drop it has over time. Like the bullets in this game are real projectiles, so they try to follow it. They slow down over time, they drop over time. So I don't know if that's referring to that or if that's damage drop off. Muzzle velocity increased by 2.7%. I think the AX50 is going to be a pretty decent sniper after these changes. They actually buffed the Modern Warfare Dragunov. This is something that's been a meme for a long time. Got about 3 meters extra damage range. Significantly increased the damage in the max damage range. So in the first damage range, it went up to 90. And then min damage was increased to 75 up from 60. So that's a huge buff there. Upper torso damage multiplier decreased to 1.9, down from 1.95. So chest damage was decreased slightly, but the rest of these buffs are going to overtake that for sure. It's still going to do more damage even to the chest just because the damage values were increased. So Dragunov, interesting. I'm going to put all this on TGD right after I make this video. We'll see how this plays out in terms of actual usage. Rytec AMR from Modern Warfare. This was the original M82 sniper, the original Gorenko sniper. It was a semi-auto heavy hitting sniper, and it just never one shot for some reason. And now it can one shot again. So min damage was increased at range. Headshot damage multiplier was increased to the point where it's going to one shot down somebody at range. It also had the explosive and thermite mags that both did different things to damage. They kind of did a regular bullet damage, then added some sort of either explosive or damage over time. Direct hit damage of the explosive is now up to 206. So that's pretty huge. That's going to hit really, really hard. Pellington. So the Pellington's always kind of been meh. There was a little while there in Black Ops Cold War integration into Verdansk that it was pretty okay, but other than that, it's kind of been just out of the meta. ADS time was decreased by 20 milliseconds. That's a pretty big deal.
Neck damage multiplier increased, upper torso damage multiplier increased, and lower torso damage multiplier increased. I've tried to use the Swiss, the Kar 98, the Vanguard Kar 98. I still find them really, really hard to use, even with like the 70 to 80 meters of one-shot range they have now, and the lowered flinch. The flinch is still a lot more than it used to be. I still find them very difficult to use personally, so I don't think that's gonna there's gonna be a Pellington meta or anything like that. Gorenko anti-tank rifle. This has been kind of the first sniper-ish meta we've had in a long time. Again, bullet drop-off increased. I don't know exactly what that means. Fire rate decreased to 111 RPM, down from 120. The Empress barrel was the barrel that everybody used, so muzzle velocity was decreased to 43%, down from 50%. Visual recoil was increased. That'll make it harder to hit those follow-up shots, because you take that first shot and then it's semi-auto, so you can finish the down really fast, but that visual recoil is going to make it a lot harder to do that probably. 400mm Kovalevskaya wrap. ADS penalty was decreased to -2%, up from -5%, so less penalty. The 440mm Anastasia custom muzzle velocity increased to 25%, up from 20, so a little fire rate buff there. Rate of fire penalty decreased to -50%, up from -100%. So now it used to decrease your fire rate by exactly half, I'm assuming is what that means. -100%. Yeah, so now it's going to be not as penalizing there. Crouch recoil control decreased to 25%, down from 40. Prone recoil control decreased to 35%, down from 67. And then the meta magazine was just the 10-round mag, just so you had a big capacity mag so you could hit those follow-up shots. ADS penalty was decreased, so the ADS time for both these mags was increased quite a bit, so it's going to be a lot slower to ADS. I think these are good changes to the gun. I think it'll still be really good. Still going to be very good, but these were nice little changes to it. On to the tactical rifles. Dude, this is crazy how many things they changed in this patch. Just a wild number of changes, and I think they're trying to kind of cap off Warzone on a good note, where most of the weapons are usable for people that want to keep playing Warzone 1. So tactical rifles, the Klauser. I thought the Klauser was a pistol, not a tactical rifle. I'm pretty sure that's a pistol. So I'm not going to cover it because it's a pistol, but basically it looks like it got some pretty big buffs to a couple barrels and the magazine. Launchers, the Joker damage value was increased. Launcher Alpha, I'm assuming that's the RPG. Damage increased as well. Bipod, the Bipod underbarrel, ADS time now decreased by -4.5%. ADS time decreased by -4.5%. So that's a double negative. I'm confused. I don't know if this is supposed to increase your ADS time or decrease your ADS time. I'm assuming it's supposed to decrease based on the way this is worded, but we'll have to check this out. That doesn't make sense to give it a buff. I'm sure it's supposed to be slower ADS time, because before it had no negatives. So I'm sure the Bipod is supposed to increase your ADS time, and this is just kind of worded in an odd way. This is a big change. So the 3 to 6x optic on all the Vanguard guns was pretty much the meta. Some people are using the 3.25x hybrid. Some people use the 2.5x. But really the 3 to 6x was really, really good, because you had both that 3x for mid close range engagements, and then you had the 6x if you ever needed it. And the Vanguard guns had such low visual recoil and actual recoil that you could actually use it on 6x pretty effectively with a lot of guns. But basically we've got a big visual recoil increase. It says 15%. I don't know what that really means. But this could be a huge change and really nerf all the Vanguard guns essentially into being more in balance with Modern Warfare and Black Ops Cold War weapons. Gun perks. Mechanic. Vehicle damage bonus increased to 200%. Vital. Horizontal recoil control penalty was increased. Horizontal and vertical recoil were increased basically with Vital. So more of a negative there for Vital. Steady ADS movement speed while firing increased to 4.5%, up from 3.5%. So you get slightly more ADS movement speed while firing with Steady now. Recoil booster hip fire accuracy is now decreased by 3%. That's a good change. Recoil booster became pretty much the standard on all SMGs over the suppressors, but now for hip fire builds, you might be considering more of a, maybe a suppressor. All right, guys, again, this Clean Raven software patch notes page is from KevBond3 on Twitter. Been talking to him about working with him for maybe some interesting patch notes on TGD for Warzone 2, depending on how good the patch notes are that they released for that game. We might be doing some really interesting things with him for TGD, so that's pretty exciting. But be sure to go give him a follow on Twitter for making this page. It's all like AI generated, I think. He just has a program that scans it and automatically makes the colors change to what it interprets as positive and negative. It gets a few things wrong every now and then, but it's like over 99% correct on the coloring. So really, really cool program here. It's instantly up anytime they update the patch notes. So yeah, that's all I wanted to cover. Stupidly long video because they changed so many weapons. I think this patch was a huge W. Big thanks to Raven for all the quality of life updates they did throughout the map. I just really think, I mean, it's okay if you don't like the map, but Raven as a whole did so many things and listened to so many of the points that the community gave feedback on. I think they deserve, honestly, a pretty good round of applause from the community. I know some people don't like certain things, and that's always going to be the case, but overall, I think Raven did a great job. But thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you all in the next one.